Hi YouTube. Today we're going to talk about the Marcionites, Marcionism. And in the last video we talked about the Ebionites and the Johannine theology. Again, both of those theologies are Gnostic Jewish Messiah cults, probably derivatives of the Essenes. But I thought what we should do probably before we get into the Marcionites is talk a little bit about Gnosticism, what it is and what it is not. A lot of people on YouTube or even scholars in books will tell you that Gnosticism has something to do with polytheism. Gnosticism is essentially a package of terms. It's just terminology, Greek terminology, derived from Plato and many other philosophers, primarily revolving around forms, the idea of a thing, whatever it is. In this case, almost universally, Gnostics have an idea of the good, the form of good, the perfect idea of good. And they typically suggest, anyway, that it actually exists somewhere, whatever existence means. Beyond that, beyond the idea of forms and the good, there really isn't much to Gnosticism. You could be a monotheist, a polytheist. You could be an atheist and follow a Gnostic system. Gnosticism only says that there are perfect ideas out there somewhere, and that we try in our personal lives, I suppose, to reach those ideas. There's more to it, depending on who you read. With Plato, he mentions the Olympian gods, and the Olympian gods do not contain within themselves the good, yet the good is a form, and the Olympian gods, depending on what they do, if they do good, they are trying to get closer to the idea of good. And of course, if they're out raping somebody or what have you, they're getting farther away from the idea of good. But in the Platonic system, at least according to what he wrote in the Republic, the Olympian gods do not have within them the form of good. Yet, very quickly, once these ideas get out there, everybody likes the idea of the good, that there is an objective idea of good out there somewhere. And they like the idea that their deity could embody that idea. So you end up with the concept of the good God, a deity out there that has within him the form of good. Again, not all Gnostics believe in the good God, although I suppose that the overwhelming majority end up believing that this good is inside the body of a god, a deity. And that's basically all that Gnosticism is. It's about forms. And again, it doesn't have to be within a god. You don't have to believe in any particular god. Gnosticism does not tell you which deities you can or cannot follow. And in fact, Gnosticism doesn't say that you have to follow any deities. Gnosticism itself, just following strictly the forms, it could be an atheistic philosophy. Nevertheless, these concepts are not just universal to Gnosticism, but they're almost universally accepted anywhere that Gnosticism comes in contact with another theology or another philosophy, a theological philosophy. Like, say, for example, the Persians with Ahura Mazda in Zoroastrianism. Ahura Mazda is a good god. He is seen as a good god. What the good gives them is a way of defining that by saying that Ahura Mazda has within him the form of good. That's all it does. It's easily understood it should be easily understood by Zoroastrians. Same thing with Egypt. Osiris is supposed to be a good deity. Again, Greeks come in contact with him. It's fairly easy for them to understand the concept of Osiris having within him the idea of good, the perfect version of good. There are other theologies, again, like the Greek theology, that do not, the Greek Olympian gods, rather, that do not have good within them. Yet, almost every theology wants some version of a good deity. And so it gives them, I suppose, purpose to their theology. And just like every other theology, we have the Jewish version of this theology. Judaism wants their deity to be the good God. And beginning probably around 200 or 300 BCE, Gnosticism comes in contact with Judaism, and you end up with Gnostic Jews. Jews that believe that their deity is good. Before this point, the Jewish deity seems to be warlike. He likes to bring plagues and kill firstborn and flood the world, and slaughter kids using bears, and does all kinds of crazy stuff. He's a vengeful, jealous God, right? But the Gnostic concepts bring a whole different idea of what the deity is, and quite a bit of Judaism ends up using those concepts. And of course, that will fall into the philosophy of Philo and the Johannine theology and the Ebionite theology, all of which believed that Yahweh was the good God. Now, let's see. For the first 50 years of Christianity, all of the cults, all of the Christian cults were Jewish Messiah cults. They're also Gnostic. They believe that their deity is the good God, and that the Logos, which is another form, is a part of Yahweh that separated essentially and went to earth. This is where you get into that weird thing about he's God and he's the Son of God. Was he actually born? No. Was he here forever? Yes. He's the Alpha and Omega and all that stuff, right? Well, the Logos was, like the good, a part of the good God, which in the Jewish case was Yahweh. This all changed around 120, at least for the Marcionites. What Marcion did is he took another idea of Gnosticism, the demiurge, and he demoted Yahweh to demiurge. In Gnosticism, demiurge is an optional concept. It's not necessary in any Gnostic theology, but the concept has been around, and in this case, Marcion uses it. What Marcion decides is that Yahweh, if you read the Tanakh, which is the Jewish text, or which he called the Old Testament, if you read the Tanakh, take it any version of literally, this deity is evil, therefore he cannot be the good God. However, he did apparently believe that this deity created the universe, therefore he's the demiurge. He's an evil demiurge. So he believes in the Old Testament version of creation. However, this deity cannot be the good God, according to him, which all kind of makes sense. If you read that book again and take it any version of literally, this guy is evil. So he demotes him. Now, this is really the one big change, the really big change for Christianity out of everything that he does. There are several heresy claims, but this is the one that I think everyone is focused on, or should be focused on. Everyone in the late 2nd century wants to demonize Marcion for the demiurge concept. It's not a concept that Marcion thought up, but it is a logical conclusion for him, given that he knows Gnostic concepts and that the Old Testament deity is, on face value, quite evil. Now, when he demoted, and this gets into why he did this, and we're not 100% certain on that, but when he demoted Yahweh to demiurge, he essentially canceled out the Jewish texts, the Old Testament that he says, the way he calls it. The Old Testament is canceled. You no longer have to follow that. Again, the first two theologies absolutely followed it. Marcionites theology does not. The Old Testament is basically a history text. Sure, it prophesies Jesus supposedly, but it is not a text where you have to follow each law anymore. And if you do follow those laws, you're following the law of a demiurge, not the good God. So he's demoted all of Judaism in a sense. But there are several effects of this. The primary effect of demoting Yahweh and eliminating Judaism from the equation is that he made being a Christian far more simple. Again, the first 50 years, people are having to come in and be Jewish in order to be Christian. So you've got this whole litany of laws that you have to deal with, a lot of stuff you've got to learn, a lot of rituals. He cancels all that out. Marcion says, look, you come in, you get dunked in the water, eat your bread, drink your wine. Say you believe, pray, you're in. It's real simple for Marcion. What may take months and months and months under the Jewish theologies is a matter of minutes for his theology. He has effectively made this a Gentile theology, open to people who eat pork and shellfish, open to people who don't care about the Sabbath, and certainly open to people who don't want circumcisions. You can imagine in the first two theologies, a 20-year-old male Greek coming in and thinking this Judaism thing is kind of cool, and then finding out, oh, I got to get a circumcision. Wow, that's fantastic, right? Jewish theology has, for a couple hundred years at least, been proselytizing. They have been trying to convert people. And I guess some success has been had. However, they're not growing. This is not this theology is not getting any bigger. You know, even though there are, again, sects of this theology that are trying to grow. And again, it's probably because of this long list of stuff that you have to go through in order to be Jewish. And probably also because even among the people that want to proselytize, they view proselytes as second class. You know, you're never really Jewish. Again, everybody here in this time frame is xenophobic and ethnocentric. So that's one of the effects of the Marcionite change here. He's created Gentile Christianity. But another effect of this, and it may be the cause of this of the creation of this theology, is that between 66 and 136, there are three major wars, all involving Judaism. And again, these are all xenophobes. Everybody's a xenophobe. So if the Jews revolt in 66 and up to 70, where the Jerusalem is sacked, it doesn't matter whether Jews were involved with that war or not. They're going to be persecuted throughout the Roman Empire. Same thing with the Kiddos War. And the Marcionites seem to come between the Kiddos War and the Bar Kokhba revolt, around 120. When he demotes Yahweh to demiurge and cancels out Judaism, he has a legitimate claim to say, we are not Jews. Please do not persecute us. Did he do it for that reason, or did he do it for the reasons of being able to proselytize easier? I don't know. However, all that being said, the Marcionites do appear to be quite successful. Someone mentioned to me once the idea that the Marcionites were some kind of a fringe group, just not successful at all. If that were the case, then why is it that the later Ebionites pick up his text and convert it into their own? The Marcionite text ends up being quite popular. Not just the Marcionite text, but the Pauline letters, which I probably will have to do another video on. On the heresy claims. The heresy claims come from Irenaeus, Tertullian, Eusebius. Justin Martyr mentions the demiurge. Again, the demiurge was the big one. Demoting Yahweh was a big deal, and the Marcionites will get flack for it later. And eventually that idea will lose. Docetism is sometimes mentioned. Docetism is the idea that Jesus was not human flesh. He was a spirit being that looked like flesh in the case of the Marcionites. In the case of the Johannine theology, he was very likely logos that appeared to be flesh. So they are probably docetic as well. We have a little bit of evidence from Irenaeus that may be the case, that the Johannine theology was a version of Docetism. In this case, logos rather than spirit. All of that comes from the idea that flesh is evil. Flesh has never been good, apparently, in Gnosticism. And so the first theologies, they don't even try to force flesh on Jesus. They make it rather clear that he's either logos or he's spirit, and he looks like flesh. It's later in the 2nd century that people will be talking about how Docetism somehow ruins their theology. How Justin Martyr says that if Jesus wasn't flesh, then it somehow it makes the resurrection worthless, makes his crucifixion worthless. All this overdramatic BS. Docetism is actually quite marginal. The difference between appearance of flesh or actually being flesh. It's a trivial little issue that later Christians will take up, mainly because they don't like Marcionism. Docetism doesn't have anything to do with anything, really. They just don't like Marcionites, mainly because of the demiurge concept, and so they got to pile it on. Yes, the Marcionites appear to be more docetic than the later versions, like in Luke. However, his personal views, we don't really know. I suspect it is true that he believed that he was a spirit being that appeared to be flesh. The Old Testament, that's the Old Testament literalness claim. Even today, if someone is taking the Old Testament literally, you'll probably find some Catholic somewhere that's saying, "Oh, he's being a Marcionite." This is at least kind of true, I think. It is obvious that if you take the Old Testament and look at it as any version of literal, that Yahweh's kind of evil. And I think that's the charge, primarily. We don't really know what Marcion thought in that particular instance. Most theologians at that time, most of the theological philosophers anyway, seem to recognize that the Old Testament shouldn't be taken literally. And I suspect that Marcion is no different. However, literal or not, it appears to be an evil deity. So, how do you take that? Anyhow, I think the Old Testament literalness is, again, like Docetism, another kind of trumped up marginal charge that really doesn't have any bearing on who Marcion was. Nevertheless, could be true. The two that I found to be completely false were that the Gospel of Luke came before the Gospel of the Lord, the Gospel of the Lord being Marcion's text. The evidence is overwhelmingly in favor of the Gospel of the Lord coming before Luke. But once you do that, you eliminate several texts. Again, on the evidence, it primarily comes from Epiphanius and the Panarion, where he compares it line by line. But the consensus should be that that the Gospel of the Lord is before Luke. That's not the consensus. Again, consensus is mostly made out of Christians, and they like Luke being exceptionally early. Pauline letters end up falling in line a lot with the Gospel of the Lord. Again, anyone that's going to tell you an untruth about which came first here is probably going to lie to you here as well. Now, the person that mentions these two things, Irenaeus, I'm not sure that the lines, those particular lines in his book, are authentic. I kind of doubt it. I seriously doubt it, really. It just, there's something fake about it. He doesn't go into any kind of depth over it. He says it in passing as if it's like no big deal, you know. But nevertheless, again, people don't like Marcion, and again, primarily because of the demiurge. But people are also trying to support their own religion. And you don't support your own religion by calling Marcion some kind of saint, or for that matter, the author of the Johannine theology or the author of the Ebionites. Not entirely clear of who those people were, but we have some suspicions. Cerinthus comes to mind. So, all that is to say that the Marcionites changed the theology drastically, opening up the theology to Gentiles. He is going to get flack. His theology will eventually go down in flames, but he's going to last a lot longer than the Johannine or the Ebionite theology, and his theology is emulated by the later Ebionites. Again, we're not 100% certain on who wrote Mark, but I suspect that it ended up going through the hands of the Montanists. Mark and Matthew are versions of the Gospel of the Lord. Luke is almost a copy. Luke adds a few chapters, changes some words, and the evidence is overwhelmingly in favor of the Lord being first in that particular relationship. So that's it for the Marcionites. Again, I think they were quite popular. And it's their popularity is going to end up being part of their downfall, because part of their theology suggests a demiurge concept, and that is going to be very unpalatable to an awful lot of Christians, an awful lot of theologians who really just don't want to eliminate the Old Testament altogether. Anyway, I think that's all I got for you today. I'll think of something else later, and that'll be that. Thanks a lot, folks. Bye.